The spiritual contract that breaks at the moment of death. There is a document that exists beyond paper. A binding agreement that was signed before your first breath and will dissolve with your last. You don't remember signing it. That was part of the terms. But every limitation you've ever felt, every inexplicable boundary that seemed to cage your spirit, every moment you've wondered why you forgot something essential about who you really are, these are not accidents. They are clauses. Before you took form in this world, your soul made a choice, not a passive surrender, but an active negotiation. You agreed to forget. You agreed to be bound by time, by gravity, by the illusion of separation. You agreed to experience pain, loss, and the dense weight of matter itself. Why? Because there was something you came here to learn, something you came here to resolve, something you came here to become. And the only way to achieve it was through temporary confinement. Edgar Cayce, America's most documented psychic, spent decades in trance accessing what he called the Akashic Records, the cosmic library containing every soul's journey across time. In thousands of readings preserved in the ARE archives, he described this sacred agreement again and again. He called it many things: the soul's lesson plan, the karmic contract, the covenant between spirit and flesh. But here is what he made clear. At the exact moment of death, this contract doesn't fade gently into the background. It shatters. Every veil lifts, every limitation dissolves, every clause that held you in human form releases you back into the vastness you temporarily left behind. In the next hour, you will discover exactly what that contract contains, why your soul freely signed it, and what happens in the sacred instant when all agreements expire and you remember, finally, completely, what you traded away to be human. This is not speculation. This is the hidden architecture of incarnation itself. And it's time you knew the truth. Let's begin with what Edgar Cayce revealed in reading after reading, case after case, across 4 decades of documented trance work. The soul does not accidentally stumble into a body. It does not get trapped, punished, or forced into incarnation by some vengeful cosmic authority. Instead, it approaches, it observes, it considers, and then, in full awareness, it agrees. Cayce described this moment with precision. Before conception, before the first cells divide, the soul surveys the circumstances it is about to enter. The parents, the family lineage, the geographic location, the historical moment, the physical body that will become its temporary home. It reviews what he called the karmic pattern, the unresolved energies from past lives that this incarnation will address. It sees the relationships it will encounter, the challenges it will face, the gifts it will be given to work with. And then it makes a choice. In one documented case from the ARE archives, Cayce described a soul hesitating at the threshold of birth. The entity, his term for the soul between lives, could see that the life ahead would involve physical disability, family trauma, and significant material hardship. The reading stated clearly, the soul was given the option to choose a different incarnation. But it proceeded anyway. Why? Because this particular combination of circumstances offered the precise friction needed for a specific lesson the soul had been working on across multiple lifetimes. The disability would teach patience. The family trauma would break open a pattern of control. The material hardship would dissolve an attachment to security that had become a spiritual prison. The soul saw the curriculum and said yes. But here is the part that matters most. That yes came with terms. Cayce called it the veil of forgetting. The soul cannot bring full memory of its divine nature into dense matter. To truly experience limitation, it must genuinely forget what it is. To learn through consequence, it cannot hold the cheat sheet of omniscience while taking the test. So the contract includes memory suppression. It includes dimensional restriction. The soul, which naturally exists across multiple planes simultaneously, agrees to perceive only 3 dimensions plus linear time. It includes energetic density. The soul, which is light and vibration, agrees to be slowed down into flesh, blood, bone. And it includes what Cayce called karmic blindness, the inability to see clearly why certain patterns keep repeating, why certain people keep appearing, why certain wounds keep opening. All of this is not punishment. It is agreement. The soul signs this contract not because it has to, but because it chooses the kind of growth that only amnesia and limitation can provide. Think of it this way: if you were training to become a master pianist, you wouldn't learn much by only ever playing with sheet music that showed you every note you were about to play before you played it. Mastery comes from the moment you close the book and play from memory, from instinct, from the place inside you that has integrated the knowledge so deeply it no longer needs external guidance. The soul incarnates to play without the sheet music, to discover what it truly knows when it can't remember knowing it, to become, through limitation, more than it was in unlimited form. This is the first mystery. Incarnation is consensual confinement. Your soul knew what it was signing up for. But there's more to this contract than restriction. There are also protections, escape clauses, and hidden terms that ensure the soul never becomes truly lost. And there's an expiration date, the moment of death. But before we go there, you need to understand exactly what this contract says, because the clauses are specific, the terms are precise. And once you see them clearly, everything about human suffering, limitation, and spiritual longing will finally make sense. If you could read the document your soul signed, what would it contain? Edgar Cayce's readings give us the closest thing to an itemized list. Let's open the scroll. Clause 1, the veil of forgetting. You will not remember where you came from. You will not recall your past incarnations. You will not recognize your soul family until the timing is spiritually correct. You will experience yourself as separate, alone, and new, even though you are ancient, connected, and returning. This clause exists so that the lessons of this particular life are not contaminated by the identities and attachments of previous ones. Cayce explained that if souls brought full memory into incarnation, they would spend their entire lives trying to recreate what they lost instead of discovering what they came to find. The veil is mercy in disguise. Clause 2, the laws of time and space. You will experience time as linear, one moment following another, cause preceding effect, age progressing irreversibly forward. You will experience space as fixed. Objects that are here cannot also be there. Distance will require travel. Boundaries will feel absolute. In the between-life state, Cayce said, the soul experiences all of its incarnations simultaneously. Past, present, and future exist as one eternal now. But to learn sequential consequence, to understand how choices unfold into outcomes, the soul agrees to be bound by chronological time. Gravity, too, is part of this clause. The soul, naturally weightless, agrees to be pulled toward planetary matter, to be held in place by mass. Clause 3, the Karmic clause. You will encounter specific souls with whom you have unfinished business. You will be drawn into circumstances that echo past life patterns. You will face the consequences of previous actions, not as punishment, but as opportunity for resolution and rebalancing. In hundreds of readings, Cayce described how souls make pre-birth agreements with other souls to meet again, to help each other complete specific karmic cycles. Sometimes this looks like deep love. Sometimes it looks like painful conflict. But the contract ensures the meeting happens. The souls involved agreed before birth to show up for each other. Clause 4, the energetic density agreement. You will experience separation. You will feel cut off from source, from your higher self, from the unity you knew before incarnation. You will experience pain, physical, emotional, spiritual. You will experience duality, good and evil, light and shadow, pleasure and suffering, not as ultimate truth, but as the condition of material existence. Cayce taught that the soul does not suffer because it is being punished. It suffers because density creates friction, and friction is the mechanism of transformation. A diamond is not created by gentle suggestion. It is created by immense pressure over vast time. The soul agrees to pressure. Clause 5, the exit terms. The contract will dissolve under specific conditions: natural lifespan completion, karmic pattern resolution, soul-level readiness, or emergency exit clauses invoked when the incarnation becomes untenable. This is crucial. The soul always retains sovereignty. Even in the deepest forgetting, there is a failsafe. Cayce described cases where souls planned multiple potential exit points into a single lifetime, moments where death could occur naturally if the soul decided the mission was complete. He also described how some souls extend their contracts beyond the original agreement because they choose to stay and serve longer. The exit is not arbitrary. It is written into the contract from the beginning. But it can be revised by mutual consent between the soul and what Cayce called the higher creative forces. These are the terms: memory suppression, dimensional confinement, karmic entanglement, density and suffering, and eventual release. Now the question becomes, why would any soul agree to this? What could possibly be worth such restriction? The answer is more beautiful than you might expect. In the ARE archives, there is a reading where Edgar Cayce was asked directly, why does the soul choose to incarnate when it knows suffering awaits? His answer, spoken from trance, was simple and devastating in its clarity. The soul seeks that which it cannot know any other way. Let's break that open. Between lives, the soul exists in a state case called the borderland, a dimension of light, consciousness, and communion with the divine. Here, the soul is aware of its unity with all things. It feels no separation, no doubt, no limitation. It knows itself as eternal. But here is the paradox. Without contrast, there is no depth of knowing. Without the experience of forgetting, there is no ecstasy of remembrance. Without the illusion of separation, there is no journey back to union. The soul incarnates not because it is broken, but because it is ambitious. It wants to know compassion not as abstract principle, but as lived experience. The moment you hold someone in pain and choose to stay. It wants to know courage not as theoretical virtue, but as embodied choice. The moment you face fear and move forward anyway. It wants to know love not as cosmic unity, but as fierce particular attachment. The moment you recognize one soul across a crowded room and feel eternity collapse into the present. These things cannot be learned in the borderland. They can only be learned here. Cayce gave an example in one of his readings that makes this visceral. He described a soul who, in its between-life state, had spent what we might call centuries studying the concept of forgiveness. It understood forgiveness intellectually, energetically, spiritually. But it had never forgiven anyone. So it incarnated into a family where betrayal was guaranteed, where the people it loved most would wound it deeply, where forgiveness would not be philosophy but necessity. And in that incarnation, the soul transformed, not because forgiveness was explained to it again, but because it chose forgiveness in the white-hot moment of betrayal and felt its heart break open into something larger than resentment. This is why the soul signs the contract, not to be punished, but to be forged. Think of the contract as a kind of spiritual kiln. Clay does not become ceramic by sitting on a shelf. It becomes ceramic by being subjected to heat so intense it changes at the molecular level. The soul is the clay, incarnation is the fire. And what emerges is not damaged. It is hardened, refined, made permanent. Cayce also taught something even more profound. The soul does not just seek individual growth. It seeks to contribute to the evolution of consciousness itself. Every soul that incarnates and learns to transmute suffering into wisdom, fear into love, separation into connection, every soul that does this work adds to what he called the Christ consciousness, the collective field of awakened awareness that is slowly permeating all of creation. Your contract is not just about you. It is about the healing of the whole. You agreed to be bound so that your freedom, when it finally comes, would carry the weight of earned wisdom, so that when you return to the borderland, you would bring back treasures that can only be mined from density. Cayce put it this way in one reading: the soul enters flesh not to escape spirit, but to serve it. This is the sacred why. Now let's talk about the how, the protections built into the agreement to ensure you don't actually get lost in the forgetting. Because the universe does not abandon the souls it sends into matter. It watches, it guides, It holds failsafes in place. And you're about to learn what those are. Here is what the contract does not tell you up front, but what Edgar Cayce's readings reveal again and again. You are not alone in this. Even in the deepest amnesia, even in the moments when it feels like the universe has gone silent, there are safeguards in place, helpers assigned before birth, escape routes built into the architecture of your life, and a sovereignty that cannot be taken from you even by your own forgetting. Let's start with the guides. Cayce called them ministering angels, guardian entities, and sometimes simply those who watch. In the readings, he described how each soul, before incarnating, is assigned at least one spiritual guide who agrees to monitor the incarnation from the other side. This guide cannot interfere with free will, cannot override the lessons the soul came to learn, cannot remove the consequences of choices. But they can send signs, they can orchestrate synchronicities, they can whisper in dreams, they can place people in your path at exactly the right moment. In one documented case, a woman came to Cayce distraught because she felt utterly abandoned by any higher power. Her life had been marked by loss after loss, and she could not feel any spiritual presence whatsoever. Cayce's reading revealed that her guide had been with her every single day. The presence she could not feel as the presence she had begged for most intensely, her deceased grandmother. The guide had been orchestrating protections, deflecting dangers the woman never knew existed, and sending dreams that the woman remembered as just random thoughts. The veil hides the help, but the help is always there. The contract includes this clause: you will not be left without guidance, even when guidance is invisible. Then there are the escape routes. Cayce taught that before birth, the soul maps out not just one but multiple potential exit points. Moments in the incarnation where death could occur naturally through illness, accident, or what appears to be chance, if the soul decides it has completed what it came to do. These are not punishments or failures, they are doorways. And the soul, even in amnesia, retains the authority to walk through them. He described a reading for a young man who had survived 3 near-fatal accidents by the age of 25. Each time, doctors were baffled by his recovery. Cayce's reading explained those were exit points. The soul had the option to leave, but each time it chose to stay because the mission was not yet complete. The young man did not consciously know he was making this choice, but his soul knew, and at the deepest level his soul said, "Not yet." This is soul sovereignty, the principle that no matter how bound you feel, you always retain the final say. The contract can be renegotiated. In extreme cases, when an incarnation becomes so traumatic that the soul is at risk of fragmenting beyond its ability to reintegrate, Cayce said that emergency exit protocols are invoked. The soul is pulled out, even midlife, to prevent damage that would take multiple incarnations to heal. This is not failure, it is mercy. The universe does not require you to break yourself in service of a lesson. Then there's the failsafe mechanism Cayce called the silver cord. In his readings on out-of-body experiences and near-death states, he described an energetic tether that connects the soul to the body throughout the incarnation. This cord cannot be severed by accident. It cannot be cut by external force. It can only be released by mutual agreement between the soul and the body when the contract's expiration conditions are met. This means you cannot get lost. When the soul travels out of body during sleep, and Cayce insisted this happens every single night, the silver cord ensures it finds its way back. When the soul hovers between life and death during a near-death experience, the silver cord is what pulls it back if the exit clause has not yet been activated. The cord is the contract made tangible. As long as it remains intact, the agreement is still in effect. And when it finally dissolves, that is death. But we're not there yet. Because there's one more safeguard you need to understand. The soul's memory is not fully erased. It is archived. Cayce called it the Akashic Records, the cosmic library where every thought, action, and incarnation is stored in perfect detail. The contract includes a clause that says you won't have access to this archive while incarnate, but it also guarantees that access will be restored the instant the contract breaks. Nothing is lost, you just can't see it yet. And during sleep, during meditation, during moments of deep stillness, the veil thins enough that fragments of memory leak through. Déjà vu, intuitive knowing, soul recognition when you meet someone for the first time. These are not glitches in the system. They are reminders that the contract is temporary and the fullness of who you are is patiently waiting on the other side. The safeguards are not there to make incarnation easy. They are there to make it survivable, to ensure that the soul, in its holy ambition to learn through limitation, does not become so lost that it forgets there is something to return to. But what happens when the contract almost breaks and then snaps back into place? What do souls see in that brief moment when the veil lifts just long enough to glimpse what's been hidden all along? This is where we turn to the near-death experience, the dress rehearsal for the final curtain. There are moments when the contract loosens its grip. Not fully, not permanently, but just enough for the soul to peek behind the curtain and remember what it temporarily forgot. Edgar Cayce spoke extensively about these threshold experiences long before the term near-death experience entered popular language. He called them borderland encounters, moments when the soul steps into the space between worlds and then, for reasons we'll explore, steps back. Let's be clear about what happens in these moments. The body reaches a crisis point, heart stops, brain activity flatters, breath ceases. By all medical measurements, death has arrived. But the soul, which Cayce said is bound to the body by the silver cord we discussed earlier, has not yet been released from its contract. So it hovers. In this hovering state, something extraordinary occurs. The clauses of the contract temporarily suspend. The veil of forgetting lifts. The dimensional restrictions dissolve. The soul suddenly sees, knows, remembers what incarnation had hidden from view. In one reading preserved in the ARE archives, Cayce described a man who had died during surgery and found himself floating above the operating table. He could see the doctors working on his body. He could hear their conversations. He could sense their anxiety. but he felt none of it as his own. Because in that moment, he was not the body. He was the soul, observing the body the way you might observe a car you've been driving but have now stepped out of. And then something else happened. The man described being pulled, not forced, but gently drawn toward what he could only call light. Not physical light, but conscious light. Light that knew him, light that loved him. In the readings, Cayce confirmed what this was: the threshold of the borderland, the edge of the dimension where the soul exists between incarnations. The man saw his deceased mother waiting there, not as memory or imagination, but as present, tangible, more real than anything he had experienced in physical life. She smiled, she communicated without words, and she told him, or he simply knew, that it wasn't time yet. His contract had more to fulfill. So the silver cord, which had stretched thin but not severed, pulled him back. He woke on the operating table, disoriented, grieving in a way because he had tasted something so beautiful that physical reality felt heavy and grey by comparison. But forever changed, because he had seen proof that the contract is temporary, that what waits on the other side is not extinction, but homecoming. Now here's what's crucial to understand. Not all near-death experiences are identical. Cayce taught that what the soul encounters in this threshold state depends on its level of spiritual development, its current karmic pattern, and the specific lesson the NDE is meant to provide. Some souls encounter light and love. Others encounter what Cayce called the lower astral, a dimension populated by confused, earthbound entities or reflections of the soul's own unresolved fear and guilt. This is not hell in the religious sense. It's a layer of consciousness, temporary and healable, where souls who are not yet ready to cross fully into the borderland linger. In one particularly striking reading, a woman described an NDE where she found herself in darkness, surrounded by voices that mocked and accused her. She was terrified. She felt she was being punished. Cayce's reading explained she was not encountering external demons. She was encountering her own self-judgment, externalized. The contract had loosened enough to show her what she was carrying internally: shame, guilt, unworthiness, so that when she returned to life, she could begin the work of releasing it. The NDE was not punishment, it was diagnosis. And it worked. The woman devoted the rest of her incarnation to self-forgiveness and service, and Cayce's reading indicated that her next threshold crossing would be radically different. This brings us to a deeper teaching. Near-death experiences are not accidents. They are built into the contract as checkpoints. Moments when the soul is allowed to remember its true nature just long enough to recalibrate, to remember why it came, to gather strength for the remainder of the incarnation. Cayce compared it to a soldier in the thick of battle being pulled briefly out of the trenches, given an aerial view of the entire battlefield, reminded of the mission, and then sent back in with renewed purpose. The soul returns from an NDE not diminished, but clarified. And here's what almost every NDE includes, according to both Cayce's readings and contemporary research: a life review. In the threshold state, the soul witnesses its incarnation from a perspective outside linear time. It sees key moments, both beautiful and painful, not from its own viewpoint alone, but from the viewpoint of everyone it affected. It feels what others felt because of its actions. This is not judgment, it is education. The soul sees where it honored its contract and where it deviated, where it acted from love and where it acted from fear. And it is met, Cayce said, not with condemnation, but with compassion. The beings of light who guide the review ask only one question. What did you learn? This preview of the full life review that will come after death serves a purpose. It gives the soul a chance to course correct while still incarnate. To make amends, to shift patterns, to complete what was left undone. The near-death experience is mercy in motion. It is the contract loosening just enough to whisper, "You are not lost, you are not forgotten," and this incarnation, hard as it is, has meaning. Then the silver cord tightens again, the soul returns, the veil descends. But the memory of the threshold lingers like perfume. And the person who returns is never quite the same. They know now what's waiting. They know the contract will eventually expire. They know that death is not an ending, but a doorway that swings open into dimensions more beautiful than incarnation allows. But the full crossing, the moment when the contract doesn't just loosen but shatters entirely, is still to come. And when it does, there is no going back. Now we arrive at the moment itself, the instant of death. Not the hours of dying, not the days of decline, but the singular, irreversible moment when the contract that bound your soul to flesh dissolves completely. Edgar Cayce described this moment across hundreds of readings with a consistency that borders on the eerie. Whether the death was peaceful or sudden, expected or tragic, the mechanism was always the same. The silver cord severs. And in that severing, every clause of the soul contract becomes null and void. Let me walk you through what happens. The body has ceased, heart silent, lungs still, brain activity fading into the final quiet. But the soul is not the body. The soul has been housed in the body, tethered to it, experiencing reality through it, but it is not made of flesh. And so, in the moment the biological systems shut down, the soul does not die. It is released. Cayce said the soul becomes immediately aware of this release, not gradually, not slowly, but in a single, explosive instant of recognition. The veil of forgetting gone. The dimensional restrictions dissolved. The weight of matter lifted. In one reading, Cayce described a man who had just crossed and was being asked, through the medium of the reading, to describe what he was experiencing. The message that came through was almost incoherent with joy. Free, finally free. I did not know how heavy it was until I put it down. This is what happens when the contract breaks. The soul feels the full magnitude of the restrictions it had been living under, often without realizing it. It's like someone who has been carrying a heavy pack on a long hike. They adjust to the weight, they distribute it across their shoulders, they manage. But when they finally take the pack off and set it on the ground, they feel the lightness rush in and realize, oh, I was carrying so much more than I knew. The soul has been carrying the pack of density, time, separation, pain. And now it sets it down. But the breaking of the contract is not just about release. It's also about restoration. Everything that was suppressed floods back. Memory first. In the case readings, this is described as immediate and total. The soul suddenly remembers not just this life, but all lives, every incarnation, every identity, every relationship across time. It sees the whole pattern, the thread that connects who it was in ancient Egypt to who it was in medieval France to who it just was in 21st century America. And it understands, in a flash of recognition, why this particular life unfolded the way it did. Why it was born to these parents, why it suffered this particular wound, why it met this specific person at this exact moment. The randomness dissolves, the meaning reveals itself. Cayce called this the soul's awakening. Not awakening into something new, but awakening into what it always was and temporarily forgot. Then comes the dimensional expansion. The soul, no longer bound by three-dimensional space and linear time, suddenly perceives existence as it truly is, multidimensional, simultaneous, infinite. Past, present, and future exist as one eternal now. All possible outcomes of all possible choices shimmer in the field of potential. And the soul sees itself not as a separate entity, but as a localized expression of the one consciousness that pervades all things. Cayce used the metaphor of a wave, realizing it was always ocean. During incarnation, the wave felt individual, separate, alone. But in death, the contract that maintained that illusion shatters, and the wave remembers it was never separate from the ocean. It was always part of the whole. It just had to forget that temporarily to experience itself as distinct. Now here is where it gets even more profound. When the contract breaks, the soul does not just remember who it is. It also sees who has been with it all along. The guides, the angels, the deceased loved ones who have been watching, waiting, holding space on the other side. They become visible. And the reunion is, according to every reading Cayce gave on this subject, overwhelming in its beauty. Imagine being in a dark room for your entire life, believing you are alone, only to have the lights suddenly turn on and realize the room is full of people who love you, who have been there the whole time, who you just couldn't see. That is the moment the contract breaks. You see them, they see you, and the separation that felt so absolute throughout incarnation reveals itself to have been an illusion held in place by agreement. The contract included the clause, "You will not see us will." Reincarnate. But that clause has expired. And now you see everything. Cayce also taught that in this moment, the soul encounters what he called the Christ consciousness, not Jesus as a person, but Christ as a principle, a field of unconditional love and divine awareness that permeates all of creation. Some souls perceive this as a being of light, others as a presence, others as a knowing that surges through them, warm and infinite. But however it is perceived, the message is the same. You are loved, you have always been loved, and you were never, for a single moment, separate from that love. The contract made you feel separate so that you could learn what it means to find your way back to unity. But the separation was never real. It was always a veil, a teaching tool, a sacred illusion. And now the illusion is over. But here's what Cayce made very clear. The breaking of the contract is not the end of the soul's journey. It is the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Because once the soul remembers who it is, it must also reckon with what it did while it forgot. And that reckoning, loving, compassionate, and utterly transformative, is what we turn to next. The contract has broken, the soul is free. But freedom, Edgar Cayce taught, brings with it a flood of recognition. Not all at once, perhaps, but in waves that build and build until the soul is standing in the full light of its own truth. Let's walk through what happens in those first moments after the seal breaks. The first thing the soul remembers is its name. Not the name it was given at birth in this last incarnation. That was a temporary label, part of the costume it wore for the sake of the contract. But its true name, its soul identity. In the readings, Cayce referred to this as the soul's vibrational signature, a unique frequency that has existed across all incarnations, unchanging even as the soul took on different bodies, genders, cultures, and life circumstances. This name is not spoken in language, it is felt as resonance. The soul hears it or senses it and thinks, "Oh, that's who I am, I forgot, but now I remember." And with that remembering comes a cascade of recognition. The soul sees its entire incarnational history laid out before it like a vast tapestry, every lifetime, every role it has played. In one reading, Cayce described a newly transitioned soul who had just crossed and was overwhelmed by the realization that she had lived dozens of lives, in forms and contexts she never would have imagined during her most recent incarnation. She had been male and female, rich and poor, oppressor and oppressed. And seeing this, seeing the full scope of her soul's journey, she understood something profound. Every role was necessary, every experience contributed, every identity was part of the curriculum. The soul does not just remember its past lives, it understands them. It sees the karmic threads that connected them. It recognizes the lessons that carried over from one incarnation to the next. It sees where it made progress and where it got stuck. And here's what Cayce emphasized repeatedly. This remembering is not accompanied by shame or regret, even when the soul sees incarnations where it caused harm. Instead, it is met with compassion. Because the soul now perceives from a higher vantage point, it sees that in the incarnations where it acted from cruelty or ignorance, it was deeply asleep, deeply contracted, deeply lost in the illusion. And it forgives itself, not in the sense of excusing the harm, but in the sense of understanding that the harm was born from forgetting, and forgetting was part of the contract. The next wave of memory is relational. The soul suddenly recognizes the people from its most recent life, not just as the roles they played, mother, friend, enemy, but as the souls they are. And it sees something stunning. Many of these people were not strangers, they were soul family. Cayce described this in reading after reading. The mother who seemed so difficult, that was a soul the person had incarnated with multiple times, working out the same karmic patterns from different angles. The stranger who appeared at a crucial moment and changed everything, that was a guide who incarnated specifically to deliver one message and then exited. The romantic partner who brought both ecstasy and devastation, that was a soul with whom the person had an ancient agreement to help each other break open in very specific ways. The soul sees all of this now. The randomness evaporates, the purpose reveals itself. And with that revelation comes another recognition. Some of these souls are here now, on the other side, waiting. Cayce described how souls who have crossed before you become part of your welcoming committee. Parents, siblings, friends, even beloved animals. They have been on the other side, aware of your continued incarnation, sending love and support through the veil, waiting for the day when the contract expires and you can be reunite. The day. And now that day has come. The soul sees them, recognizes them, rushes toward them with a joy that has no equivalent in physical experience. It's not just, "I'm happy to see you again." It's, "I remember now. I remember who we really are to each other. I remember the love that predates this life and will outlast it." One of the most moving readings in the ARE archives describes a father who had lost his young son to illness. Years later, the father himself passed, and Cayce's reading described the reunion. The son, who had crossed first, had been growing and learning on the other side. He had not aged in the way physical bodies age, but his soul had continued to evolve, and he was there, radiant and whole, when his father arrived. The father wept with relief, not because the son was alive, he knew that now, but because the guilt he had carried for not being able to save his son dissolved in the light of understanding. The son's early death had not been a failure or a tragedy in the soul's perspective. It had been an agreed-upon exit point, part of both souls' learning. And now, on the other side, they could continue their relationship free from the pain and limitation that physical life had imposed. This is what the soul remembers. Love does not end. Relationships do not terminate. The contract binds and separates temporarily, but the connections between souls are eternal. And then, as the waves of memory continue, the soul remembers something even larger. Its purpose. Not just the purpose of the most recent incarnation, but the overarching mission it has been working on across multiple lifetimes. Cayce called this the soul's ideal, the specific quality or lesson the soul is devoted to mastering. For some souls, the ideal is compassion. Across every incarnation, in every circumstance, the soul has been learning to love without condition, to hold suffering without turning away. For others, the ideal is truth. Every life has been about stripping away illusion, seeing clearly, speaking honestly, even at great cost. For others still, the ideal is service, or courage, or creativity, or faith. Whatever the ideal, the soul now sees how every incarnation has been a different classroom for the same essential lesson. And it sees whether the most recent life moved the needle forward. This is not about success or failure, it's about progress, growth, the slow, patient work of becoming. And the soul, seeing this, feels a deep satisfaction, not because it has arrived, but because it has continued. The contract held it in limitation, so that it could learn what it could not learn in the spaciousness of the borderland. And now, having learned, having suffered, having loved, having tried, the soul brings those lessons home. It brings them back to the eternal, back to the collective, back to the pool of consciousness that is enriched by every soul's incarnational journey. This is what the soul remembers first: who it is, who it has been, who it has loved, and why it came. But there is more. Because woven into the main contract were smaller agreements, sub-clauses, promises made to specific souls, debts incurred, patterns left unresolved. And now that the main contract has dissolved, the soul must face what it agreed to on a more granular level. This is the karmic reckoning, and it is both illuminating and transformative in ways we need to explore carefully. Here is what Edgar Cayce made clear in reading after reading: the soul does not just sign one contract at birth. It signs many. The primary contract governs the soul's relationship with incarnation itself, the agreement to forget, to be bound by flesh, to experience limitation. But within that contract are smaller agreements, soul-to-soul contracts, promises made before birth between your soul and the souls of specific people you would encounter during the incarnation. And when the primary contract breaks at death, these subcontracts come immediately into view. The soul sees them, remembers them, and must reckon with how they were fulfilled or left undone. Let's start with the concept itself. Before incarnation, Cayce taught, souls meet in the borderland to plan the major relationships of the upcoming life. Not every casual encounter is pre-planned, but the significant ones, parents, children, romantic partners, key teachers, major antagonists, these are negotiated in advance. The souls agree to play certain roles for each other. One soul agrees to be the mother who provides stability. Another agrees to be the father who models strength, or whose absence teaches self-reliance. One soul agrees to be the partner who mirrors your wounds so you can heal them. Another agrees to be the friend who sees your potential when you cannot. And yes, some souls agree to be the ones who wound you, betray you, or oppose you, not out of malice, but because your soul requested that particular lesson. These are soul contracts within the larger incarnation contract. And when death comes, the primary contract dissolves, but the soul must now review how it honored or failed to honor these smaller agreements. This is the karmic reckoning. Cayce described it not as a judgment imposed by an external authority, but as a self-witnessing. The soul sees its own choices with perfect clarity from all perspectives. In one documented reading, a man who had recently crossed was shown the key relationships of his life laid out before him like a map. He saw his wife, with whom he had made a pre-birth agreement to support each other through a shared lesson in patience and forgiveness. He saw how, in the early years of the marriage, he had honored this contract. He had been patient, he had forgiven, he had stayed present. But in the later years, he had withdrawn. He had become bitter. He had stopped trying. The contract was not completed. And now, on the other side, he saw this clearly. He saw how his withdrawal had affected her, not just emotionally, but energetically. He felt her loneliness, her confusion, her slow resignation. He didn't experience this as punishment. He experienced it as truth. And the guides who stood with him, those beings of light Cayce, described as ever-present in the life review process, asked him gently, "What would you do differently now?" This is the nature of the reckoning. It is educational, not punitive. The soul is being prepared for its next incarnation if it chooses to return. It is being shown where it succeeded and where it still has work to do. And here's what's crucial. Some contracts are completed even if they don't look successful from the outside. Cayce gave an example of a woman who had been estranged from her daughter for decades. The relationship ended in silence and unresolved pain. From an earthly perspective, this looked like failure. The contract, whatever agreement they had made before birth, seemed broken. But when the mother crossed and underwent her review, she saw something unexpected. The contract had not been to maintain a harmonious relationship. The contract had been to give her daughter the experience of being released from obligation. The daughter's soul had come into that incarnation carrying a pattern of enmeshment, of believing she was responsible for her mother's happiness. And the mother's soul agreed to play the role of the one who pushed away, who could not be fixed or saved, so that the daughter could finally learn the lesson: you are not responsible for another person's healing. The estrangement, painful as it was, completed the contract. And both souls, on the other side, would understand this and feel nothing but gratitude for the roles they played for each other. This is the complexity of the karmic reckoning. Sometimes what looks like failure was actually fulfillment. Sometimes what feels like betrayal was a pre-agreed-upon catalyst. Sometimes the person who hurt you the most was the one who loved you enough to play the villain in your healing story. The soul sees all of this now, and it is staggering in its implications. Because it means nothing was wasted. Every pain had purpose. Every relationship, no matter how brief or broken, served the curriculum. But there is another layer to this reckoning. Not all contracts are fulfilled. Sometimes the soul made an agreement, and then, in the density and forgetting of incarnation, simply could not follow through. Maybe it promised to care for someone and abandoned them instead. Maybe it agreed to speak a truth and remained silent. Maybe it committed to breaking a pattern and perpetuated it instead. These unfulfilled contracts do not result in damnation. They result in continuation. The soul, seeing what was left undone, makes a choice. Will I return to complete this? Will I carry this into the next incarnation and try again? Cayce called this the soul's karmic ledger, not a system of reward and punishment, but a record of agreements kept and broken, lessons learned and lessons still in process. And the soul has full agency over what happens next. Some souls choose to rest in the borderland for what we might call centuries, integrating the lessons of the life just lived before incarnating again. Others choose to return quickly, eager to complete what they started. And some souls reach a level of completion where they no longer need to incarnate in dense matter at all. They transition into service roles as guides, teachers, or what Cayce called elder souls, beings who assist others still in the incarnational cycle. The reckoning reveals where the soul stands on this spectrum, and the choice of what comes next belongs entirely to the soul. But before that choice is made, there is one more aspect of the contract that must be addressed: the consequences of sudden death. Because not all souls exit according to plan. Some are taken, or so it seems, before the contract's natural expiration. And what happens then changes everything. There are deaths that seem to defy the contract. Accidents, violent crimes, illness. That strike without warning. Disasters that sweep away lives in an instant. From the perspective of those left behind, these deaths feel wrong, premature, a contract violated. But Edgar Cayce's teachings offer a perspective that is both challenging and deeply comforting. There is no such thing as accidental death. Even when death arrives suddenly, unexpectedly, before what seems like the right time, the soul was not taken by surprise. Let's unpack this carefully, because it touches one of the most painful aspects of human grief. In the readings, Cayce described how the soul maps out not just one exit point, but several. These are not rigid, unchangeable dates. They are windows, opportunities, moments when death could occur naturally if certain conditions align. Some of these windows are expected: old age, long illness, a gentle fading. But others are what we would call sudden: a car accident at a specific intersection, a heart attack during a particular emotional trigger, a moment of being in the wrong place at what appears to be the wrong time. Cayce's teaching is this: even the sudden exits are part of the contract. They are written in as emergency clauses. The soul, before birth, looks at the incarnation ahead and says, "I will attempt to complete these lessons, but if the density becomes too much, if the incarnation veers off course in ways that would cause more harm than growth, I reserve the right to invoke an early exit." And those exits are programmed in, not as failures, but as fail-safes. In one reading, a mother came to Cayce devastated by the death of her teenage son in a drowning accident. She wanted to know why. Why him? Why then? Why in such a senseless way? The reading was tender but uncompromising. It revealed that the boy's soul had completed what it came to do. His incarnation had been shorter than most, but it had fulfilled its purpose: to teach his family about love's impermanence, to break open their hearts in ways that would prepare them for deeper service, and to model for his peers a kind of joy and presence that would echo through their lives long after he was gone. The drowning was not an accident. It was an exit clause invoked at the soul level when the mission was complete. The mother could not have saved him because he was not meant to be saved. And here's the part that Cayce emphasized again and again: the soul itself was at peace with this. On the other side, the boy understood why his life had been brief. He saw the ripple effects of his exit, the ways his death catalyzed transformation in the people he left behind. He did not experience it as tragedy, he experienced it as completion. Now, this teaching is difficult to hear when you're in the grip of grief. It can sound like spiritual bypassing, like a way of dismissing the very real pain of sudden loss. But Cayce's readings never minimize the human experience of mourning. They hold two truths simultaneously. From the soul's perspective, sudden death is not a violation of the contract. It is part of the contract. And from the human perspective, the grief is real, valid, and sacred. It must be honored, felt, and moved through. Both are true. The soul is at peace, and the survivors are devastated. This is the mystery of incarnation. What looks like tragedy from inside the veil is often completion when viewed from beyond it. But there's another dimension to sudden death that Cayce addressed with great care. Sometimes the soul is not ready to accept the exit. Sometimes death comes, the contract technically expires, but the soul, confused, attached, unwilling, refuses to cross fully into the borderland. This is what we turn to next. Because when the contract breaks, but the soul clings to the physical, something else must happen. Something that requires assistance from both sides of the veil.